Alrighty, we are at 10:45, and so I'd like to welcome everyone here for this hackathon. The Future is Fun with Lisa Forbes and David Thomas joining us from the chillier area of Colorado. Yeah, so we're excited to see what they have to present. I know it's going to be fantastic from what I've heard and seen thus far, collaborating and working with them. So here we go. Let's have some fun.
All right. Let me pull up our visuals here. I'm not much of a slides type of person, but I feel like Zoom is helpful to have something to look at. So thanks for coming to the Future is Fun Transformational Power Play. Again, I am Lisa Forbes, and David Thomas is going to wave at you. Wave. Hi. So we want to, this is going to be playful and interactive by design. We can't really have a session on play without doing some play. So we're going to start with that. But basically, David and I have been working for the past couple of years on figuring out how to make teaching more fun, how to make learning more playful. And we've done a lot of trial and error and had some success, had some failures, but we've really kind of figured out somewhat how to do it. And then at the end, we'll share some resources with you. We created this community this summer called Professors at Play. So if you're interested in kind of having more conversations about this, we'll let you know how to do that here at the end. All right.
To say real quick that we are, we're going to work from the general down to the specific, and we're going to talk a lot about, kind of the power of play and what the benefits are, but eventually we're going to get down to what it takes for you to be more playful and kind of coming up with your own plan. So if you stick with us till the end, we promise to leave you with some actionable things that, could I don't know, we'll just say change your life for the better. Okay.
That's a big promise. All right.
I like big promises.
Here we go.
Okay, so we're going to start out with a little game here. Now, this is a game you just can play on your own at home. If you got a pencil and paper, it's easier. It's a little game that is called word equations, and this is just a little icebreaker to get you going. And so here's how word equations look. And let's see, go to the next slide, Lisa. So this is a word equation. Now, this is a saying or a statement or it's a phrase that you almost for sure are all familiar with. And the way you decode the phrase is the numbers are the numbers, but then you have to figure out what the letters stand for. So anybody have a guess at what this might be? Just pop on your mic and just shout it out. Okay, either you're shy or stumped. Oh, there it is. There you got it. Okay, so go to the next couple slides. So the solution to the equation is all for one and one for all. Okay, so for some of you, that's super easy. For some of you, that's super hard. But here's the game. In 1 second here, we're going to show you 30 different word equations. And I'm going to give you, I don't know, about a minute to solve as many of these as you can. And to make it more fun, whoever can do the most of these, Lisa and I will send you a prize, okay? Something good. We'll figure out what a really great prize would be. Okay, so everybody ready? So again, just write down the ones you can get. Let's see who can get the most, okay? On your mark, get set, go. Now for the phrase that every college professor loves, pencils down. Okay. Okay, oh, you want to know what the prize is before? Oh, we do know what the prize is, but we're not telling you yet. Okay, so before I show the answers, who thinks that they might be in the running for the prize? Anyone? Did anyone get one? Raise your hand or type it in the chat. Okay, anyone want to beat Jay with 6?
Oh, I got 8.
8. Who got 8? Jody?
Yeah.
Yeah, 8. Anyone beat 8? Here's the answers. You can check yourself. All right, going once, going twice. I declare Jody the winner.
Wow.
In fact, I can tell you what we're going to send Jody now that you know that she won. We're going to send her a bag of Funyuns, because what could be more fun than Funyuns? And we're going to send you some Professors at Play stickers. So that's what you get for actually playing. Okay, so we'll talk more about this in a minute, but hopefully it's a little bit of challenge, a little bit of warm up. We want to show you more icebreakers. This is so much fun. We're going to hit you with a couple more. So Lisa, why don't you give them the next one?
All right. So this one is called Flappy Bird. David, can you put, what happened? Can you put the link in the chat?
Right away. Here we go.
So this one, it's easier to demo, but for some reason I'm already sharing this. So click on this link, click on the Flappy Bird when it comes up, then you'll pull it up on your screen. And what you'll do is you're going to try to get this little bird to fly through those pipe openings without hitting the pipes or you die. And the way that you keep the bird in the air is repeatedly hit the space bar to get it going. So we're going to give you 1 minute and we're going to see who can get to the highest level flying through the pipes for a prize.
Are you gonna share your screen and play?
Well, here, I gotta stop share. Okay. Back up.
And
So
this
if
is way
anyone-
more fun if you turn your microphone on so we can hear how you're doing.
Yes. So if anyone is already playing, you're just getting a little bit of practice here before we start the actual time. Okay. So here it is. I'm just repeatedly hitting my space bar. And then here comes the pipes. Uh-oh. Oh, see, it's
Yeah.
extremely hard. See if I can get through one. Okay, didn't do it. Okay,
I gave you one. I gave you a count. Gave you one.
so we're gonna give you 1 minute play and see who can get the highest score. Ready?
Are you gonna give a prize for this too?
Yes, this is mailing a sticker.
Okay.
Ready, set, go.
Hey Lisa, what's your student record on this? I had a student get like 20 somehow. I have no idea.
I had a student get like 37 and he admitted that he was addicted to it years ago. So he had played it several times.
I think my high score is 5. So
Yeah. Okay, about 30 more seconds. Okay, we'll stop there. What'd you get? What are the scores? And I think the levels are through each pipe. 1, 13. Wow, it's impressive. Anyone beat 13? Doesn't look like it. That one's a tough one. Yeah. Kimberly, have you played before or you just amazingly were good the first time?
she's played a similar game there.
Okay. All right. So Kimberly, if you scroll up in the chat box, I posted my email. If you want to give me your mailing address, I'll send you a sticker. All right. So we have one more thing of play before we move on. Can you see it, David?
Yep, I got it in the chat.
Go ahead.
I just sent it in the chat. Are we going to do breakouts for this one? Do you need to set breakout rooms up?
Yeah.
Okay. How many people in a breakout?
There's 23, maybe 5.
Okay. Okay.
Go ahead.
Are you going to explain what we're doing before I send them?
Oh, I thought you were.
Oh, no, this is your icebreaker. So
All right. Lovely
I don't send them to
miscommunication.
breakout rooms when it's time.
All right, so what we're gonna do here, this is another one that I run in my classes. I call it Scrolly questions. So I'll have, once you get to your breakout rooms, I'll have one person, are they able to share their screens, Jody?
Yes, they can do that.
Okay, perfect. So I'll have one person share your screen and pull up this website. And this website is just thousands and thousands of random questions. You can see just scrolling down forever. So the person who shared your screen is the scroller, and you're going to take turns in your group being the stopper. So the scroller is going to start scrolling and somebody says, stop. And then how are you not losing pens? That's the question you have to answer if you're the stopper. And then answer it, and then the next person be the stopper, stop, and then you have to answer that question. It sounds pretty silly, but the amazing conversations that come from this that you would never have with a typical question that we give students in higher education, it's pretty amazing. So we're gonna do that just as an example here.
All right, so we're sending you to breakout rooms for, I don't know, a couple of minutes. Ready? Here we go. All right, so as folks are coming back in, what did you think of the various activities? Any comments just off the top of your head? Ones you liked, ones you didn't like? Type in chat or pop on your mic. You can go ahead to the next slide, Lisa.
Okay.
I have a hard time with this one only because I have a little bit of a dyslexia that took me a while to click in as to what were we doing. And so I think with my kids, I think once you get practiced in it, though, it might be really fun. When I'm saying that, I'm talking about the what says, 12 days of Christmas, that whole thing.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So my mind got stuck on this would be too hard for my students. But at the same time, I think if you practiced it on a regular basis, it would get easier.
You bet. Yeah. And I think it's a wonderful point. I mean, what we really wanted to emphasize, these are all different kinds of icebreakers or mind things that we have done in different classes or in presentations. And they're very different. I mean, two of them were quote unquote competitive. One was very collaborative. But what they all do is they kind of challenge you to, in a safe way, get involved in the activity. And it's really important that it's playful, right? I mean, the prizes were funny and inconsequential. We didn't force anybody to do anything. I mean, if you didn't like the game, you could really kind of more easily sit out. And so that's kind of the idea. But we have used all of these, and I think Lisa and I both could tell you, like Flappy Bird, for example, I've used that in an architecture class, and you'd think that the students would scoff at it. But then when they start playing it, they get so excited. And when you get to the end of the semester FCQs, you'll find Flappy Bird showing up on your course questionnaires. And it's very, very surprising that it's just even that little moment of play can really help ignite this kind of community and excitement. And we'll talk more about that. But we really wanted to show, and you can click to the next slide, Lisa, is this idea that we don't want you to feel any shame or anything about what kinds of play you like. We all like different kinds of play. And when Lisa and I talk about adding play to the curriculum, we don't have some idea of like more Jeopardy games or more role playing. We think about the variety of play and the ways that people play. And we would encourage you to not only explore the kinds of play that you like, but to try to explore kinds of play that maybe your students would enjoy. So, sports are very active, having students stand up. Gambling is not everybody's thing, but, a game where you roll the dice and you have to answer questions based on the dice roll could just be a playful intervention. We all know about gamification, even the roller coaster. I mean, having students stand up and close their eyes or turn around. These are kind of playful interventions that you can do. And we'll talk a little bit about techniques, but what was important to us right now is just to think about, wow, we all play in different kinds of ways. And so, Lisa, if you go to the next slide, we wanted to take a moment and have you just do this in, we're going to copy this Google Docs link into the chat. And what we want you to do is go to that Google Docs, it's open, and type in just when you think about play. It doesn't have to be in your classroom as a teacher or as a student, but when you think about when you play, whether you ski or you sew, whether you like movies or cooking, what do you feel like when you're actually playing? And you don't have to even be specific about what, like, I feel happy when I sew, just happy. But if you can go into that document, and then we'll go ahead and I'll share the screen for the document. What we want to do is we want to, I'm sorry, Lisa, you're having the share. If you could share the document, we want to just see what feelings come up for you when you think about play.
You go ahead and share the document.
Okay, here, I'll put the link in. I've got the document. Okay, so here's the document. So just real quick, if you can just type in some of those feelings, and we'll take a look at those. And I guess we don't have to, we can just look at it right here. Yeah, look at, they're flowing in. Fulfilled, focused, autonomy, choice, excitement, easier to interact, energized. And I encourage you as you kind of type these words in to start to think, oh, what would I do to bring these kinds of feelings into my classroom? We have this nasty tendency to think about play as something that we do when we're not working. But I think when we reflect as teachers, these are the kinds of feelings that we would love to have in our classroom. These are, normally if I ask you to list the kind of feelings you have in a classroom, it might be curious or sleepy or, thinking about something else. But when you think about play, you're so engaged, you're so involved in it. Your body and mind are just open to the challenge. Now, I want to reflect back really quick. Lisa and I made you do 3 random things under the guise of play: solve puzzles, this kind of, this technical challenge, this community question answering, all these different kinds of skill-based challenge activities. And you just did them because you didn't think twice about it, because under the guise of play, you engaged. And we'll send back this list, and we think it's a wonderful list. And why don't we go to back to the slides and to the next slide? And I want to say a couple quick things about some of the background of approaching play from the notion of human engagement and feelings. And then we can talk to you a little bit about what we think of as sort of the problem of play.
Okay.
So
Okay, now it's not, every time we pop out of it, it like kind of goes wonky. Let me reset it real quick.
okay, and when I look at this, I don't personally see anything on this list that I wouldn't like to enact in my classroom. I don't see anything here that I feel is orthogonal to teaching. And I just want to point that out in kind of this stark relief, because I think that when we are first asked, why aren't we more playful in the classroom? I think our gut reaction is because we don't think that play has a place in our classroom. But when you actually think about how people engage and feel about play, I think you start to see something different. And I'll point to you real quick. This is a quick definition from a book called Love 2.0 by Barbara Friedrichsen. And Barbara Friedrichsen's a psychologist from University of North Carolina, and she studies positive emotion. And she thinks that Love 2.0 is this sharing of positive emotions, synchronicity between people, between their biochemistry and behavior, and a reflected motive to invest in each other's well-being. This is a wonderful technical psychological explanation for this penultimate positive feeling. But I also think this is exactly a definition of what it means to play. When you're playing together, you share positive emotions. You start to mirror each other biochemically as well as behaviorally, and you invest in the play. And so basically you're investing in the other person so that you can stay at play. So that's your kind of technical citation for, if you want to understand the positive power of play, maybe go look over here. So from that, we end up with, the next slide, Lisa, we end up with what I just really wanted to get. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is where we're going to actually talk more about play and teaching. I missed a part. So Lisa, take it away.
All right. So when you think about play, we think about childhood. We think about primary education. So when David and I started getting into this, we started looking in the literature, and really the literature about play in higher education is relatively limited. When you just Google search it or put it in your library database, mostly it's about childhood. So here's some books that we found that have been useful. Some of them are about education and some of them are just about play in general. And we've kind of had to borrow ideas from the play world and how does that fit in higher education. But when you read the literature, we started seeing a lot of the same positive benefits, like some of the emotions that you all just typed in there. We see students are more willing to take risks, to experiment. They're more innovative and creative. It's a hands-on process. It creates joy in the classroom, community, motivation. So as we read this literature, I was sold on play, except what questions I was left with is, okay, how do I do this in my classes? And how exactly is play? What is the process of play? Like, I know it is important, but I don't understand exactly how. So this past spring, a year ago, I did a research study of my own teaching, bringing play into the classroom. And I teach graduate level master's counseling students, mental health counseling. Just give you a little background there. But I did a qualitative study with them. I'm not going to go in depth about that, but I wanted to show you, this is a graphic that I made out of the data that I was getting from my students' voices. And so basically they said, when there's play and playfulness, it creates laughter and fun and novelty and excitement. And when you have that, then it creates this relational safety in the classroom. They kept talking about sense of belonging and community and warmth and a safe environment and trust. And I think at the same time, what I was seeing is it removes barriers. And so students, I think, come into the classroom with various stressors or anxieties or fears kind of about the class in general, but also just their life. They bring that into the room. And so play allows them to have, they called it like self-care, and it was stress reduction. And I was able to approach the content in a more centered place because I was able to reduce that stress. And I think all of those things awakened their intrinsic motivation. They didn't say the words intrinsic motivation, but as they described it, it really reflected the intrinsic motivation literature. So they said, I was more interested in the process than I was the grade, as I usually am in other classes. The material was intriguing. I felt motivated. I felt excited. I enjoyed coming to class. So these were all really, really important things, which then I think led to this vulnerable engagement. They were doing things, taking risks. They were active in the classroom. They were open to feedback in a different way than I think they would have been if play wasn't involved. And in counseling, we give a ton of really personal feeling feedback. So that was huge. And I think as educators, what we want is students who are engaged. And I think sometimes the vibe I get is educators expect students to come into the classroom engaged. And while that would be nice, I don't think that we can demand that. I think we have to do something to create that. And I think this process of play can really get us there quicker, which I think led to this enhanced learning. They said they learned a lot. They learned from their failures. It was a memorable class. It was, and their learning was more on a personal and meaningful level than some of the other courses. So I wanted to share that just to hopefully get you seeing that it really, really does matter to the students. And then I'll just give you a minute to read through. These are some of the quotes my students said. I'll give you just a minute. So these are really, really inspiring quotes to me as a faculty member. I wanted to point you to the bottom left, where a student said it created a safe environment and we are expected to rise to the occasion. One of the kind of fears I had with bringing play into the classroom was, is this just going to be fun, but it's actually making learning too easy or trivial? And that's not what the students said at all. They said, actually, with such a warm, safe environment and the relational safety, they were able to rise to the occasion and challenge themselves, and they were open to me challenging them more. So I think we can actually expect more from our students if we utilize play and create those relationships.
Hey, Lisa, Julie has a great question in the chat there.
Sorry, I can't see the chat. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll read it. It says, Julie says, would you say it served as an inviting state transition into focusing on other class members through shared vulnerability to see each other on less threatening terms?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's one of the main things the students said. And the thing that was interesting about my study that I hadn't quite connected before was even play that is irrelevant to the course not connected to the content, still has a really powerful process in helping students engage in that learning process on a deeper level. And I think it's exactly what you're saying is they're able to relate to each other on a human level, kind of drop the barriers, drop their fears, and be more open to each other and to the learning process. So I think that's a huge part of it. I think vulnerability is a huge part of learning, and I think play allows people to be more vulnerable. Okay, so one of the other question I had after reading the literature is like, okay, what does it mean to bring play into the classroom? What does that even look like? So this is how I conceptualize it. I see the first level as playfulness. And David, I'll have you give some examples in each of these two if you would like. But playfulness is just like, as a faculty member, not taking yourself so seriously all the time, not having to be the hierarchical know-all expert, but making it more collaborative and, being more playful. The wording on your syllabus is more playful. It could be really small adjustments, but just having that base of playfulness. And that's something you could do today. If you had class today, you could go in and be a little more playful. The second one is,
I would just like interject there real quick and say, I mean, playfulness can be very personal. I mean, I always joke, it could be a wacky tie or a colorful scarf, or you could come dressed up in a Halloween costume, whether it's Halloween or not. One example is in a class I was teaching, I was telling Jody about this earlier. I rearranged the desks every week into these increasingly eccentric formations. And the students never questioned it. And I thought it was funny. But I think, it reminds them that, oh, there's some, quote unquote, there's something not right with this teacher, right? Or he's expecting us to be a little more thoughtful. I'm playing at teaching to a certain degree. And by the way, it had nothing directly to do with the class. It was just me being ridiculous.
And I think the playfulness level is more kind of spur of the moment kind of stuff, just being away, not doing something. Like I teach mental health counseling, and we took a break, and after the break we were going to start talking about empathy, which is like huge in counseling. And I saw one of the students eating a cucumber. And so we come back after break and I said, okay, let's get back together. And I said, so what does empathy have to do with cucumbers? And they thought it was a serious question. They're like coming up with all these amazing metaphors. And I'm like, I was just kidding. That was just for fun. But those are some really amazing answers. So just like little moments of play and playfulness, I think is part of it. And then the second one is the connection former activities. You probably know these as like icebreaker activities. Some of the ones we did today are the connection former activities. And those are just to get people in the learning space, reduce their stress, have a moment to come together, create that community and bonding. Those are really powerful. And I think faculty often miss that because they think, oh, I've got too much content to teach. I don't have time for that, or that doesn't relate to the course objectives. So there's no point in that. And I think that's a big mistake, because that graphic I showed you of my data that looked at play and how it goes through this process, I think connection formers were actually a big part of that, creating that community. And then play to teach the content is the third level. And that's more like actually teaching the content through some type of game or some, engaging in playful discussion. And really, that doesn't have to change much about what you already do. For example, before I brought play into the classroom, I had my students, one of the discussions that we do is talking about therapeutic self-disclosure. As a therapist, when do you talk about yourself in session? And it's kind of a tricky thing. There's no one right answer. So that's why we have a discussion about it. But to add play to it, I have them have the same discussion. So this discussion is the important part, right? And then at the end, at the last 5 minutes, I say, okay, so now I want you to come up with a list of top 5 bits of advice you would give a therapist if they're trying to figure out when to use therapeutic self-disclosure. So kind of like, when it's for the benefit of the client, give me top 5 things. And then from that list of 5, I want you to create an acrostic, which is the first letter of each list item in the list creates a word. And I give them some examples because I didn't know what acrostic was till David told me. And then we come back together as the large group and they share their list of 5 and they share their acrostic. And then they vote on the group that had the funniest or the most creative or whatever. And you don't have to make it a competition, but at least have them create some type of product that comes out of those discussions that's playful. So the play in that activity took 5 minutes, but the important part was the discussion that lasted 25 minutes. So just to give an example of how you can include play to teach content.
And let me give you another quick, just from a completely different context. I was teaching the architecture of fun, trying to teach architecture students how to be more playful in their design and create playful designs. And it turns out it's really a chore because they are so steeped in the beauty aesthetic of creating beautiful buildings that they couldn't break the rules. And so I had them do an activity called Make the Hamburger More Fun. I am a businessman who wants to make my hamburger restaurant more fun. Tell me how to make a more fun hamburger. Immediately, they leapt on this because by moving the subject domain out of architecture where they had all these rules to hamburgers where they didn't have any rules, they were actually enabled to the design instincts they already had to be playful. So it can be big or small. And I just wanted to point out, a completely wildly different example.
Thanks. I love that one. And the last one, the 4th at the top, the whole course design, is actually pretty difficult to do. It's something I don't know how to do yet for my classes. And I've only known of one example. I know there are others, but I only know of one specifically. David, I wonder if you can share that one for them.
You bet. So there's a professor, a law professor at the University of Denver where I teach and work, and Roberto Carrata, he's an administrative law professor. He teaches administrative law, labor law, and regulations of industries and stuff. How fun is that? Well, I will take Roberto's administrative law class because he teaches the entire class, the entire semester, as a case-based class based on Jurassic Park. The first assignment in the course is to read Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park book. And then after that, they spend the rest of the time in teams designing administrative policies and legal recommendations for how to regulate extinct animal parks. And this is just this fascinating thing of like, how do you deal with it? What are the ethics? How do you deal with the international law? And students produce these 50, 60, 70 page briefs by the end of class, steeped in actual administrative law, but based on Jurassic Park. And like everyone else, his students start out skeptical and he wins them over because it's just such a joyful and fun thing to do.
Thanks.
So Laura asked a question about the how do you sell this, and we're going to get to that. But before that, can you go back one slide, Lisa? Tom had a really great comment in the discussion, and Tom, just go ahead and explain what you're talking about, and maybe filter it through this design model. 'Cause I think Tom's pointing to something that's near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, I mean, my course, I have several years ago completely flipped my courses around to where they're a challenge for the students. So at the beginning of the semester, I do what I call the sorting hat exercise, where students sort of try to figure out what they're most interested in. I group people together based on commonality of interests, and those groups work together through the semester looking at challenges. I'm teaching government. So people will do things like, we need to increase access to healthcare because I can't get health insurance, or we need to make it easier for people to vote, or increase participation, or my group is not being represented, and things like that. How do we get more voices heard in society? Things like that, and that becomes a semester-long puzzle. And all of the activities in the class are geared around solving for that puzzle, because at the end of the semester, it's not about solving the puzzle itself, but creating solving for how to solve the puzzle, or to begin to solve the puzzle. In other words, how would you actually go about changing this? What are your first steps? I mean, do you work with interest groups? Do you throw money into voting machines? So on and so forth. How do we actually make real change? And that's a game in and of itself. And what that does is it drives the students toward discovery of those parts of the content that's important to them, and then that becomes meaningful as well. And play should lead you into exploration, and without meaning, play and exploration doesn't really get you very far. And that's one of my concerns about the way a lot of people think about play when they're thinking about work or anything. I mean, we're always playing. We're playing right now. We play when we are brainstorming. We play when I'm playing when I write my syllabus and designing my course, because it's writing game rules. A syllabus is a game, and a set of game rules for your students. So if you think of it in those terms, and that's what the one of those playbooks I saw in your thing, it's the one written by the doctor. I can't remember his name now. It's on my shelf back here somewhere. But that's what he's talking about when he's saying, look, we think about play far too narrowly, that we need to understand that it infuses everything that we do. And sort of going to Laura's question about people who don't want to play, the solution there is a lot of times people who don't want to play don't want to play because they think it's trivial, because they don't see the point in wasting their time spending hours and hours trying to make Tetris blocks stand up in a certain way, or whatever. That's what they equate play with, and they don't realize how much play is going into everything they're doing. So, but students are resistant to this because play works against grades. Grades invite conformity, play invites creativity, and those are two countervailing pressures. And I go through a lot of things in my class to try to push the grades to the background. Playing the game gets you a grade, not how well you play the game, but whether you engage with the game, and whether you engage with the game at a certain level matters more than if you roll a double six and get to roll again in Monopoly or whatever. And that's also very important. And I think you have to really pull everything. I think of play not as something that's separate, but is absolutely integral to learning in that sense.
Absolutely. And I think that's why it's important when you look at your comments in terms of Lisa's pyramid, which is playfulness is on the bottom. Sometimes we jump ahead to gamification, and we're not even playful. And so it kind of exterminates it. And I love Tom's example because his class may not be based on Star Wars, but he embodies playfulness in it from the beginning. And so the other pieces and parts fall into place. And so that's very important. And I want to address some of these other comments too as we go through, and maybe go to the next slide here, because we've been talking.
Solving for government is just as hard as blowing up the Death Star. You need a plan either way.
That's for sure,
and I'll go with that.
I was going to probably skip over this activity because we have all these benefits here, right? Because I think there's this urgency to say, we all kind of get it. I mean, we're kind of preaching to the choir, but when you look at these benefits, we talked about the emotional benefits. Now we're actually talking about some of the practical research-based benefits. And again, you look at this list, these are all research-based kinds of things that we have found, we and others have found from the benefits of play, and that they should be very authentic to those of you that are already implementing this. So if you could skip the next slide, if there are other benefits that you think that we're missing, please type them into the chat. We'd love to hear about that. But I want to get to this point that Tom's making and that Laura asked about is, so how do we get there? Well, before we get there, I think we need to address the objection, because if there's so many benefits to this, why don't we do it? I mean, there's just this rational question about, if this is so wonderful, guys, why isn't everybody doing that? So if you go to the next slide, Lisa, that's the problem. The problem that we face, this is why we wanted to really embody some play, talk about the benefits, talk about some of the outcomes, but do we want to really recognize there is a problem? And what is the problem? Well, the next slide. Why are we afraid to play? We think that's the fundamental question. And is it fear of failure? Is it something else? So what we really need to do then is to think about this question for a minute. And Lisa, why don't you talk a little bit about your experience in addressing this directly, about moving from a professor who wanted to be playful into a playful professor?
Well, I think there's different reasons why people are afraid to play. I think part of it is like Laura's saying in the chat, play can feel vulnerable. So as a faculty, you know, the status quo of higher education, at least this is my perspective, is as a faculty member, you should be the expert. You should be in charge. You should be lecturing. You should be telling your students the information, you know, that kind of stuff. And there's not, play is often not included in that dialogue, in that narrative. And so I think there's a lot of, it's hard to step outside the status quo of what's been modeled to you and what's been taught to you about being a faculty member. So that's one thing that I've come up against, is like, this feels risky, bringing play into my classroom, especially as a younger non-tenure track female faculty. That feels risky to me. And so I think there's like, the identities you bring in the room can sometimes make it feel like a challenge or a risk. Sometimes I think it's, we're afraid to go against the status quo. What will my colleagues think? What will my students think? Maybe my students won't like it and they'll get, you know, I'll get bad end of the semester reviews. And I think part of it is fear of a lot of different things. So is there anything else you wanted to add to that, David?
No, I think it's just important that we recognize that there's a fear there. So if we could go to the next slide, we want to do a little quick activity. And since we've got a small group, I don't think we'll do this as breakouts, but we would like to develop an inventory of fears. Let's not just talk about this in general. Let's get to some of the specifics, and go to the next slide, Lisa. And then we'll take a little break in a minute. But here's some of the fears that we're familiar with. In the chat, or actually even better, you know, pop on the microphone. What are these other fears? I mean, in like kind of these kind of like these categorical fears, or maybe there's something specific, like I was dressed down by my department chair for you know, not being serious enough.
Is it okay for me to share?
Please,
Sure.
please, thank you.
I was very inspired last summer by this workshop. We did a improv night, and I just had so much fun, and I tried using a little bit of that, and then I also did some questions of the day, and I found that for me as at the time an online teacher, it really helped me feel like I had a cohesive group, and I felt that kids were more willing to share. However, when I got my reviews, there was questions about that, like, you know, she was off topic often, and off topic to them was really on my end very much on topic, but in a way to expand their brain, in a sense of getting their experiences or throwing something out there. So I thought that was a very interesting dichotomy, so to speak, and I have a suspicion it was more of the older students that were complaining about that, and they weren't really online a lot. They just checked in and checked out a lot. So I have a feeling that it's expectations on their part as to, yeah, let's just, someone had just said this in the chat, let's just get it done and let, you know, tell me what I need to know and I'm going to move on. So that's one of those weird things, and I don't know how my faculty are going to take that particular critique. I don't really care too much at this point because it worked for me to have a cohesive group.
Right. I think that's a good point. I found that too with my students in my research, is that, I mean, depending on their age, they've had decades of being taught lecture-based style where grades are important and you sit and listen and take notes. So if you think of like neuroplasticity, the thing you do over and over and over creates the strongest neural pathways. And so when then all of a sudden you're telling students, hey, we're not going to be, you know, sitting lecturing at you, taking notes, we're going to do this engaging play, their brain is not used to that. And so I think some students are resistant to that because they're just, their brain's not in that type of shape. And I think some people, like someone mentioned in the chat, that they're worried about the grades, you know, how is this being graded? How am I being evaluated? So to me, it's going to take some deliberate effort to try to reprogram students' brains. And also one thing I do at the start of my classes is I am very explicit with my students about play, how I use it in the classroom, why I use it in the classroom, and here's what you can expect. And that way, when we're doing Flappy Birds, which they're like, this has nothing to do with mental health counseling, they know why I'm doing it. So I don't know if that would help, or if you've done that before.
I think that at least taking the warm up, I call it a warm up by the end, seriously, not that they had to be serious about it, but that they were committed to it, is something I could bring out in front right away earlier. Yeah.
Mhm.
So we wanted to go ahead and take a break. Well, Lisa, why don't you go to the next slide real quick, and then we'll go to the break slide. I need you to do something. We already kind of, we'll come back to this, right? But it's to stay on track. I just want you to think about the fears that you do have. I mean, realistically, if you're honest, what you don't do because you're afraid. And we'll come back to those fears in the solutions phase. But what we want to do is we want you to take a health break. We'll take 5 minutes. We'll come back and, at about, 11:40, 42. But while you're there, we want you to find something in your office or home, wherever you are, that just kind of reminds you of play. Like I literally have this on my desk all the time. It's just a deck of playing cards. I fiddle with them on Zoom meetings. It's just fun. I like magic tricks. But it's always a kind of a reminder at hand that, I'd rather be playing, or maybe I can be playing at what I'm doing. So find a play memento, get your coffee, go to the bathroom, whatever, do yoga, 5 minutes, and then come right back. We'll stay on camera here to hold you accountable. When we come back, we're going to spend the rest of the time breaking this down into a set of solutions, some fun ways to figure out how to become more playful and crack out of that. All right, well, see how many people we lose at the break, which would be really sad to lose people at the break, because they'll only have all the problems and they won't have the solutions, but we're willing to deal with that. As a quick recap, I mean, this is a pretty, believe it or not, it's a pretty methodical walkthrough. We try to get you to experience a little bit of the kinds of playfulness you might do in an online class, in a Zoom class. We've really tried to get you to reflect on the idea that play is bigger than just icebreakers or, Jeopardy quizzes. The playfulness is an approach, a sense to life. We've got you to think a little bit about some of the underlying mechanics that make play function in higher ed and education. It's not just a lotion that you put on your teaching and it makes it all soft and supple and more playful. It really is a systematic intervention in the human relationships and the mental preparation that students undergo to learn. We've hopefully got you thinking a little bit about the problem, which is that despite all this wealth of opportunity that play offers to us, that there are some really major barriers, and those barriers are probably best expressed as fears. Now, we call them fears because, if you're afraid of falling off of a high building, and you're standing at the edge of a building with no railing, that's probably a very valid fear. But if just the thought of standing on a high building is paralyzing you from going out of your house, that's probably an irrational fear. So we know these fears have some basis in reality, but we're trying to reflect on the fears and to put them into their appropriate measure. So that's what we want to do next. We want to talk about fears. We want to break down some of the fears. And then eventually we want to help you think about some actual solutions and personal approaches that you can take to become strategically more playful in your own life. So Lisa, kick us off with how do we do this?
So one thing, an issue I have with higher ed, I have lots of issues with higher ed, but one of them is, if there's a problem, people say, give them more trainings, give them tools, give them tips and tricks. And as a mental health counselor, I say tips and tricks and tools and solutions aren't going to work unless that we confront the underlying issue first. And then those tools and tips and tricks will actually be able to be implemented. So it's kind of what David was just saying about, we can tell you all different types of connection former activities to use or how to be playful, but if we don't address our fears first, I think that's kind of tough. So what we're going to do, David, do you want to split into smaller groups so we can have discussions about this, or did you want to stay?
So how many people per group do you think makes sense?
Like 3.
Okay. So make 3 groups.
No, groups of 3.
Groups of 3. Okay, so
Keep
that would
doing
be,
this.
that would be like 4 groups.
Okay, so what we're gonna do is have a chance for you to get into smaller breakout rooms and just have discussions about your fears and how to challenge those fears. Like David was saying, sometimes it might be an actual issue, the fear, but sometimes it's really just kind of within us that we can challenge those things and have a little more courage. So I'll give you an example of one that I've had to challenge within myself is as a younger non-tenure track female faculty. I initially had a fear of like, my colleagues won't take me seriously. And so I had to challenge that of like, well, what is their authority over me? And what is the narrative that I'm living by? And really, my colleagues don't have any authority over me. It's just their perception. And the narrative I'm living by is kind of the status quo of higher education that I said earlier of like, to be a faculty, you have to be serious, you have to be overworked, you have to be stressed out because then you're not successful if that's not, you know, what you're doing. Other people might have different narratives of higher education, but that's kind of what I've gathered. And so I had to ask myself, is there evidence that exists that my fear is reality? And really, I couldn't find any evidence that my colleagues weren't taking me seriously. It's just a feeling I got, a fear that was coming up. And then what evidence exists that identifies the falseness of that fear? Well, actually, since I've been doing this, some of my colleagues have come to me and asked me how to bring more play into their classroom. So that's evidence that maybe they do take it seriously. And then I think asking yourself, if I make this change, if I overcome this fear, what's the positive outcome that can come from this? And what's an alternative narrative that I can make for myself? So instead of saying my colleagues won't take me seriously, I decided to say, if I embrace being playful, there may be a chance my colleagues might not take me seriously, but they don't have authority over me. And I'll actually find more joy and satisfaction in my job if I'm playful, and it'll align more with who I am as a person. So it's kind of like taking a very rigid and strict fear that's telling you something and thinking through it and disputing it to make it more flexible to give you some more courage. So however you want those discussions to look in your small groups. David, are we able to share the personal play plan? Because it has those disputing fears discussion guides if people wanted to follow those.
Yeah, let me pull that up real quick. And then I'll throw you into groups and then I'll send it as a message here. So we'll send you into groups. Come up with 1 or 2 fears that you'd like to kind of dispute, and then I will put a link into a document that has some of this structure in there. Okay.
But
And
David, they will need to have that access before they go into their breakout rooms, or you'd have to visit every breakout room and give it to them.
oh, can I just send it as a breakout room message?
Nope.
No.
Okay, then I better do that. Hang on. Okay. Here I am trying to be efficient and I'm not being efficient. Okay, there's the doc.
Everybody has something to play with, so they can just do that while they're
We'll be
waiting.
playing with something. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so there's the document that you're welcome to take a look at. Let me make sure that should be shareable to everybody. Yep, so you can look at that. And then here you go. How long do you want to give them, Lisa, about?
I'm not sure where we're at on time.
We'll figure it
You
out.
can just give them updates on how much time they have left.
Okay, so here you go. Have some fun.
Yeah. Okay, is everyone back?
Should be, yep.
All right. Okay, so we want to debrief and hear if you're willing to share out some of your conversations, things that came up, or have you disputed your fears before we move on? So if anyone wants to just jump on.
Well, we talked about how geniuses never stop playing. I mean, that's, and so therefore we need to teach our students how to play. This is one of my I showed this to my group, but does anybody know what this is? This is, let me put a light on it so you can actually see it. Problem with the virtual background is it makes it go away. All right, watch what happens when I flip the switch. It's Claude Shannon's Ultimate Machine. Basically, you flip the switch and the little hand comes out and turns itself back off again. It flips the switch back to the other position. This is play. This has no purpose whatsoever. It's silly. But this is the kind of thing Claude Shannon did. And Claude Shannon basically created the digital age because he played with the concept of numbers and the fact that we can digitize everything. It was basically worked out by him. You know, the whole zeros and ones bit. Everything that we're doing right now, all the underlying principles of all of that comes from the guy who invented this box.
Yeah.
Among other things. And he also used to ride his unicycle through the halls of MIT and Bell Labs.
That's funny.
So don't separate the two is the point. You know, we teach our students how to play, teaches them how to think, and teaches them how to break barriers, right? Teaches them not to be fearful.
So let me ask this question, because I get the sense from this particular group that, you know, we're mostly people that have already confronted some of these baseline fears about what it means to play. And we've got our own kind of internal justifications, and maybe you added a few reasons from the earlier discussion. But how then do you address those same fears with your colleagues, with your students, with your administrators? I mean, in a certain sense, if I'm worried I won't get tenure if I'm viewed as too playful, that's also a fear that my peers don't want to tenure me, because then somehow they will be honoring something playful in our profession that shouldn't be honored. So how do we dispute these fears even outside of our own? I mean, I think Tom's providing some arguments, but any thoughts on that from anyone, or any good discussion on how you actually break down these fears and take them down to size?
I'll share a little if that's okay. And I don't know that my answer is right, but what I've found in my program a little bit is that if you are perceived as somewhat more fun or able to get the message across more easily, then there's a certain amount of what's the word? I don't really want to say jealousy, but there's another word for that, where you shouldn't be better than others, and you shouldn't have your own ideas.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you should be working more like we are. I find that very difficult, coming from a very different background from many of them, where creativity was honored, and now it's a little bit treated as being different, and intentionally being different. And so that's where my fear sometimes is how do I, just like Lisa, how do I honor myself and still be part of this particular group?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I wonder if the perception is like looking at really good FCQ scores because you're being more playful is like, well, your class is just really easy, or
Yeah.
it's turned into a popularity contest, not necessarily that they're learning more. So I think that's hard to face as well. But to me, it's like, I mean, in counseling, we work with clients all the time about not worrying so much about external validation than we do our own internal validation of self. And that's a hard thing to do in life. But I think it's kind of similar to this that we're talking about in higher education, is if you're okay with it and you think you're doing the best thing and what's right for you and what fits for you, then it really doesn't matter what your colleagues say or think. But I think that's a hard thing. That's easier said than done a lot of times.
Well, yeah, I think where we do worry is that whole tenure thing. And then I think once you maybe get past that, it doesn't matter so much. But I'm at an age where it doesn't matter so much anyway, but I see it. And when I'm tired and feel frustrated with life, and that always gets big. And that's the hard part, particularly if you're working from home and it's all on email. It doesn't work too well either.
Yeah, we've heard a lot of faculty who use play actually hide the fact that they use play. They don't really tell their colleagues what they're doing because they fear, perception or not getting tenure or whatever. So, I mean, I think there's ways around it. It's awful that we have to, some people feel as though they have to hide it. But I think what David was saying earlier is like, it's a larger issue. It's a systemic issue about higher education and the narratives of what we're expected to be and look like. So even if you individually change what you're doing, you're still living within this system with these troubling, limiting narratives. So I think what David was saying earlier is like, how do we challenge the system and how do we talk to our students so the system changes that we can fit into it differently? I don't know if anyone has thoughts on that.
Yeah, in the chat, Payman points out that it changed the K-12 education system as a whole. That's the greatest problem to learning. It's the system's deeper than just, you know, the students that we have.
Mm-hmm.
I would be curious too to hear any thoughts or insight into the problem of students, right? The student fear. I paid good money to study this serious subject, so therefore I expect you to be serious or something. How do we convince students that that fear is unfounded?
My feeling, I think that there's definitely that, but there's also, in my experience, a lack of creative thinking in our students. And I think that goes back to the high school, K-12, which is so surprising because I'm always seeing people going to science fairs and this and that and the other. And isn't that about creativity? But when it comes to classroom thinking, there is no creativity.
Mm-hmm.
So I think people are fundamentally creative. I think that they're afraid to be creative. They're afraid that they'll feel shame. I think they're afraid of failing. I think they're afraid they'll be judged. I think they're afraid that it's not okay to be fun in class. I think that professors don't embody playfulness. The teachers, if the teacher's not playful, then the students certainly are not going to feel like, I mean, other than the quote unquote class clown. So the pyramid of play is really important. And I think addressing these fears and recognize them as real fears. I mean, you know, a department chair may discourage you from doing things because they're trying to maintain a serious sense of decorum in the department. And they might allow a few outliers, particularly if you're a tenured white male professor, you know, to be a little more eccentric. But we really need to challenge those fears in order to open up some of these opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa, do you want to kind of move? We had an activity here around designing some fun activities, but I think the way this conversation's gone, we'll skip past that. But we would encourage you to continue to design cool, fun, exciting new activities. And if you'd like to join us in doing that kind of work, you know, we'll give you our links and you can let us know. But I think that we'd like to kind of move into the personal and tactical level and maybe talk a little bit about, yeah. So we're skipped that. Okay, so let's talk about this. Let's talk about, and I want to frame this real quickly with this. This talks about the personal plan, but I also say not only is it personal, but think about how you might help the people that maybe want to do this and are really stuck. Because I get the sense that this group isn't as stuck as some folks that they see it, they like they're looking over the wall of the playground, they can't figure out where the door is to get in.
You want me to do this part?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think bringing play into teaching, being playful is really on a continuum. So if you think of like a 1 to 10 scale, 1 being like, you know, stuck in traditional narratives of higher education, not being very playful, very serious, 10, you know, the other end of that. Consider what number on the scale you are. And then kind of thinking about what are some ways that you can become more playful and move up the scale if you wish to. I think we don't all have to be at a 10. We can choose where we want to be on that scale, maybe depending on our personal fears and the realities of those. But kind of where are you on that scale? You can type in the chat or say it out loud. Where are you on the scale from 1 to 10? And then thinking of what is something we can do to become more playful? Or maybe it's we already are playful. What is something we're going to do to encourage our students or encourage our other colleagues?
So on a scale of 1 to 10, I do this all the time. I think I'm like a 7. I think I'm pretty good at it, but I got a lot of headroom. I'm a C. What are you, Lisa?
Well, I think it depends on how far out your scale of 10 goes.
Oh, it goes
If,
crazy.
if
So,
you have some really, crazy, wild ideas for how your classroom can be more playful, then I would say I'm more like a 5. But if you think 10 is like, is lower in the risk scale, then I would say I'm a 7. So I think it depends for each person.
well, why don't you show the next slide and let's talk a little bit about the scales. This is an example. This is sort of like David's continuum of play from 1 to 10. And this is mine, right? This is what Lisa's saying. So I think of the scale as anchored on traditional, professor-driven, and safe, all the way up to playful, collaborative, and fun. And so I think bringing food to class is kind of like gateway. Like hey, isn't this neat? I brought banana bread to class, and then the wacky scarf, icebreakers, and et cetera, et cetera. I get up here to like class secret society, and I have that's my 7. I haven't quite been brave enough to do this, but I'm going to run an entire class as a secret society where every student has their own secret agenda. And I don't even know how it's going to work. And then, finally on the far end, it's a little bit closer to the Jurassic Park administrative law class. And I would tell you I haven't done that because I haven't thought of a good idea. But I think the reason I haven't thought of a good idea is complete and total fear of failure. So on this, I'm probably a 5.5. So I'm 5.5 on my own scale. And you can kind of see what your scale is.
Mm-hmm. So a couple people have posted in chat. I think it's interesting. Elizabeth said I'm a 4 in a lecture, but 7 in lab.
Nice.
So there's some difference there in terms of context, what's happening. And then Elizabeth also said, what works against me is that I'm older, thin, female, so I don't come across as jolly. And I think there's a lot to be said for the unique identities that we hold. Like, what does play look different for a white tenured male professor than a non-tenured Black female professor? There could be some difference there in how it's perceived. And also what I typed to Elizabeth was different disciplines. Like in counseling, I find my students are pretty open. Initially, they're a little like skeptical. They just want to take notes and get out of class. But once they experience it, they're pretty open. But I have a colleague in the engineering department, and her students, no, they do not have it. So I wonder if there's some difference in discipline in terms of students and what they expect.
And then there's Laura's comment there, which is, I think, super valid too, which is the kind of the distinction between performance and play. I think a lot of professors are playful at the bottom level. They're performatively playful. I mean, like I certainly use my privilege to walk into class and crack jokes and, to be a little more silly because I already have all this unearned authority because, I'm tall, I'm white, I got gray hair. But I still think it counts. I don't think that we should conflate play entirely with, games and roller coasters. I think it's okay to say, like, if I just present a playful pose in my class, I'm helping move up that scale of play.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go to the next thing. We really got a couple things to just kind of wrap up here, and hopefully these are useful tools for you. We could do an entire, 2 hours on this, but let me put this into the chat for you.
This is the one that you all had in the Disputing Your Fears breakout groups. This is nothing you need to do now, but just kind of take a look over it. Part of it is disputing your fears. Part of it is you filling out your own continuum of playful learning from a 1 to 10 scale. And then the end of it is setting your playful goals. I think a lot of this bringing play into our teaching is about challenging the narratives on professionalism or status quo, that kind of stuff. Because what I find is people come to these workshops about fun or play, and they're really excited, they're really motivated, but oftentimes I see people end up not doing much with it. And I think it's because it's really going to take challenging status quo and just doing something different. And that I think is hard. So I find, I keep going back to me being a counselor, you don't get places unless you actually set some intention to do it. And it sounds like a lot of you are already doing this. But if this personal play plan would be helpful as something concrete that you can really take some steps in working towards becoming more playful and whatever that looks like for you. And I do think it's small steps at a time. And I think one thing people think is it's scary because it's like, I got to jump all in and be this playful person. And that's not really what it is. I think on that continuum, if you're at a 3, what is it you need to do to move to a 4? That's it. And it may be one thing a semester. But this, I think, can help be a little more concrete into how do we do this.
So now we get to this fun thing. And if you guys haven't noticed, I got to mention it, Elise has been illustrating this presentation. So this is going to be super helpful to her. So the next slide is your play mementos. So like I said, I got my cards. If you're willing to share, I'd love to see what you have. It gives Elise something to draw. But I'd also like to just hear kind of, what it represents to you in terms of your playfulness. And like I said, for me, I like playing cards. It's these infinite possibilities. And I love the fact that they're the basis of magic tricks and they have this history. And so they always remind me that just play is just everywhere. And it's almost just at hand at any time. So that's me with my play memento. Anyone else have their play memento they'd like to share?
I have my kitty cat. I have a lot of cats, and so I always have cat toys around. And I always end my day playing ball with one of my cats.
Nice.
There's one right there.
There is. And she wants me to play.
Yeah.
Enough of this Zoom.
The cards and cats. Anyone else? Lisa, what do you got?
This is a children's book. It was my favorite children's book when I was a kid. It's called The Big Orange Splot. And basically this man lives on a very neat street where everything's the same and everyone conforms to the same thing. And then one day he paints his house crazy colors and people are like, you've gone mad. And then one by one, he encourages all the other neighbors to paint their houses. So to me, it's like challenging, like I was saying, those narratives of what is expected of you and just kind of stepping out and just doing what is innate to you. And so for me, that's like having the courage to be more playful in a higher ed setting where it doesn't often feel very playful.
Anyone else care to share? I love to see these things. And remember, these are personal, but they're your reminders. You should keep them at hand, So you just see it. You see the little action figure. You see the baseball sitting on your desk, and it's just a reminder, oh yeah, I am a playful person. Despite what everyone keeps telling me, I am a playful person. I do have joy and positive experiences.
Hi, I'm Kelly. This is my squishy dragon guy. I don't know what my daughter picked it out, gave it to me. He sits on my desk and it's cute, but it's also squishy and fun and from my daughter. So it's just a cute little guy.
Love it. Kids are great play inspiration too.
So remember, the trick now is you got to keep that on your desk, especially if you're at work. You have this, like all these toys on your desk. So.
Someone in the chat said they have a set of watercolor pencils and doodle pad. That's really awesome.
Oh, I love that.
Love that. Creativity. Any others?
Well, one of the important rules of play is that play is never compulsory. It's always voluntary. And that when you're tired of playing, you should do something else. So why don't we go ahead to our next slide and wrap it up? Because we want to be authentic,
So we have a couple ideas for you if you're ready to join us. One is you have a chance today to enter the Secret Society of Playful Professors. It's very official. Not really, but can you post the link to that, David?
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out what
If you are ready to take the oath and enter the secret society, David's going to post a link and you answer some questions and then you get a very super official certificate that you can print and hang next to your desk. So that's one way. And then another way is to join us. This is our website, professorsatplay.org. And we also have social media you can follow us on. David, if you can post all that stuff too. And in this website, you can access our Professors at Play listserv. We have 600 faculty on it right now from all over the world. And it's just a conversation about play in higher education. Sometimes people will email the group to ask for ideas or ask for inspiration or about some literature that they can't find. So it's a really great resource if you're interested in that. And then today, with the Winter Games, have an opportunity to debrief this at lunch, starting in 10 minutes. So all those links should be in the chat if you're interested. Do you have more to say about any of that, David?
I don't think so. I mean, definitely Professors at Play is a great way to stay in touch with Lisa and I, but also to stay in touch with the broader community that we are building. The Secret Society of Playful Professors link, you're the first to experience this. And if you know someone you'd like to share it with, it's pretty stringent admission requirements, but feel free to send that link around. The last thing I'll say is I don't know exactly what the deal is. We will make sure 100% that these slides get posted to wherever the Winter Games slides are going. We will put some of these resources back up as well on the Professors at Play site. So, more than anything, stay in touch. We want to hear your trials and tribulations. We're hoping that our community can continue to be an advocate, but also a support community. So we love hearing your stories. So thank you so much for spending your long afternoon with us here. And please join us at lunch. The lunch is a debrief. So we'd love for you all to talk about your experiences, what you thought about this, or your insights. Basically, we're tired of talking. So please come. Jody, anything else in terms of wrap up?
Yeah, so I just shared in the chat just what you said, what's up next, and then the link to the day's schedule to check out the rest of the day's festivities, including fireside chat and the medal ceremony. So thank you very much for joining us. I had a lot of fun. I'm currently filling out my form to join the society, and I have a few people in mind to whom I will send this. So thank you very much, David and Lisa, for a wonderful session.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Oh, and if you want a
Thanks,
prize,
Lisa.
make sure you send us your mail address so we can mail it to you. Jody, we need yours. Who
All
else
right.
won? So I think she already left, Laura. Cool. All right. All right, I'll see you in the lunch session here in a few minutes, Lisa.
All right,
Okay.
stop our recording.
Yay.
See you then.